Hello everyone, I hope you've had a lovely weekend. It's Sunday again, and the time where we have a look at the best games on sale this week, and I try and dig out some gems. Now, we are playing some cracking games at the moment for review. I can't go into what they are, but they're decent titles coming out on Switch, so do make sure you tickle the buttons and stick around. And of course, we do give away a free game each and every week with this series. All you need to do is leave your comments, like this person did, and they've won a free game. Nice one. If you want to save yourself 5% on your Eshop credit as well, you can do that at SwitchUp.gg. You don't need to do anything fancy. You just buy your Eshop credit there and you'll get 5% in cash back. Happy days. Alright, what are the best games on sale this week? A couple of hidden gems and some Savaloys? Well, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Oh dear, let's find out. First up, we've got the sponsor of today's video. It's a game called I See Red by Whiteboard Games that's coming to the Switch soon. And it's basically a top-down twin-stick roguelite with a very red theme, where the main protagonist is on a quest for revenge across the galaxy and many different ships, all within a pretty nifty cyberpunk world. And their pure rage has made all the enemies glow with a dark red hue. You can use things from the environment during combat by blowing up different objects. You can smash down walls. It's very much destruction-centric, with you moving your way through procedurally generated levels with a massive arsenal of weapons to use as well. But it also features a quite nifty little grappling hook mechanic, which enables you to swiftly move around and also use it for dynamic enemy takedowns. This one was originally released back on PC in 2022, but if you're a fan of games like Hades, it certainly might appeal to you. It has that fast-paced, addictive quality that we so enjoy. All of the price details for the sale are on the screen now, and once again, just a big thank you to the publisher for sponsoring this episode. The first game then is the lovely Observer, which features Rutger Hauer of Blade Runner fame. Tears in the Rain and all that. But here he plays as essentially like a burnt out detective trying to help someone find their missing son. Now, I've got to be honest, I thought the very end of this one wasn't as good as it could have been. It was interesting, but it just didn't hit quite as much as the other aspects of the game. This is a slow burning detective game where essentially you have 3 different vision modes. Your standard one, there's one where you can see like electronics and things, and you'll need that for the puzzle solving. And there's one that I can't really describe, slightly unusual, but it does work very well. And you've got the ability to like tap into people's brains to try and find out what happened to them, because you'll find like a corpse and you'll jack in and then you'll be able to do their experiences. It comes from Bloober Teams, so there is a bit of a horror element to it as well. At one stage, you're like being stalked by this creature. It's very atmospheric actually. I was really surprised. I enjoyed this so much I actually played through it again on a different platform. It's not terrible on Switch. There are a couple of blurry spaces, but generally it's okay. And for what, £4.04? 85% off until March the 10th. That is such an easy recommendation. It is a huge download. It's 18 gigs, but worth it for sure. Enjoyable. Next up, we've got Blasphemous 2, which is 50% off. That's just £12.49, or the regional equivalents on the screen, and that's until March the 18th. That's 3.5 gigs, so not quite as bad. This was an interesting one. Now, you've essentially got a continuation of the same storyline. You start out the game by essentially waking up in your coffin. It has that Souls-like combat, but also that Metroidvania element that a lot of people seem to enjoy, and I did really enjoy it. I thought the Metroidvania aspects worked better. There were some elements that didn't work as good as the first game, in my opinion. Like the artwork, the way it was presented in the first was very pixelated and had like a macabre quality to it. This time around, it just looked too clean. You know, it just didn't have that same, I don't know, unusual fear that the first would instill in you. Still, it has a cracking soundtrack, like so good. And the pixel art of the actual game itself and the animations look lovely. An enjoyable time if you like the genre, and I think even if you don't, honestly. As I say, half price for Blasphemous 2. That goes on until March the 18th. Elderand is a pretty interesting one. I haven't spoken about it a great deal, but it's hit its lowest ever price. It's 80% off, down to £3.59. It's like an action RPG platformer. It's another that has that Metroidvania style exploration, and I do wonder how much H.P. Lovecraft thought to himself when he sat writing his books. Every game is going to use my stylings, because this is another that really does draw upon his written universe. There's quite a bit of customization as well. You've got things like your character's appearance, different stats and weapons that you can use, and the world itself is also quite standout. I think one of maybe the most impressive things though are the different enemies. There's a ton of enemy variety here, which isn't something you always get to say. actually. While it doesn't nail everything and it's a little on the shorter side for its genre, about 6 or 7 hours, I think it's certainly good enough for this price. What, £3? That is an absolute bargain. Now there is also a physical of this one, so if you're a physical collector it might be one to pick up that way, but obviously you're going to pay a little bit more than this. Elderand is 80% off until March the 8th, and yeah, the cheapest it's been. It's just a 3 gig download. Now I did want to chuck KO the kangaroo in here. I wouldn't throw a kangaroo normally, but at 50% off, down to £3.74, I'm willing to throw slightly. That sale goes on until March the 1st, and it's essentially an old school 3D platformer featuring this little kangaroo. Does remind me quite a bit of Crash Bandicoot in the way the levels are structured. It's a very colourful game actually. I guess it's like Crash Bandicoot with like Spyro style visuals, the new Spyro. They did shoot themselves in the foot when it launched though. I remember we were playing the review code and it just kept resetting the progress. You'd hit like the first stage, end of it, and it would like reset to the start when you rebooted the game, but that persisted throughout. Now thankfully they have patched all that up, but man, what a nightmare. Isn't that like the worst patch you could possibly get, or the worst bug I should say. There's quite a few DLCs available for this as well, so if you've got the base game, maybe check out some of those DLCs. Enjoyable. That then takes us onto Hypnospace Outlaw, which is 80% off until March the 15th. This is for you, and I know there's quite a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us that enjoy these kind of weird games. I don't know if it's something to do with like as you get older. I found that the older I've got, the more I like these kind of existential, strange experiences, whether it's in film or books, or as we've got here in games. I don't know what is that all about. I really don't know. Things like Donnie Darko, like I loved when I was a kid, but I like it even more now. And games like Hypnospace Outlaw, they just appeal to me more. Maybe it's just because we've played so many normal games at this point that when something comes along and it's just a bit odd, I guess it just carries an interest to it. This is a 90s internet simulator where you're essentially scouring through random websites to hunt down wrongdoers. All the while you're keeping an eye on your own inbox, trying to avoid different viruses and things, using different apps on there. And basically, as a Hypnospace enforcer, you're trying to manage all aspects of people's like online lives, I guess. You're almost policing that. It sounds weird. It is weird, but it has a strange nostalgia to it as well. Anyone that grew up with Windows 95 and MS-DOS and a 486 is going to understand what I'm talking about. If you're a bit like, I don't know, if that doesn't make any sense to you, maybe this isn't one for you. But yeah, it certainly, I don't know, it hit something in my brain for sure. It's just £3.09, it's 80% off, and just 813 megs. It would take about 7 or 8 hours to finish.
Important message received.
Good game that. These sales are crazy prices, aren't they today? You've got Pronty down to £4.19. What is Pronty? Well, it's like a Fishtroidvania. It's got a narrative that basically centers around like an underwater city where humanity had once found a new home, but it all went Pete Tong. And as humans tend to do, I think we buggered it up. Now you take on the role of a sea guardian called Pronty, who's got this like javelin spear thing, and it's just a really nice setting to have a Metroidvania. Really, it's quite unusual. You will of course get to explore that massive underwater city. It will feel familiar if you like your Metroids, and once you've completed it, which will take around, well, I always take like the normal completion times with a pinch of salt. I'd say about 10 hours realistically. You've got a boss rush mode as well, so you can go back and fight the hardest bosses in order and things like that. So there's quite a bit here really for the money. And that one at the moment at £4.19, that's 70% off. That does match its cheapest ever price, but it only goes on until February the 26th. So yeah, if that tickles your fancy, then pick that one up before it swims off. Following on from that, we've got something completely different. It's New Star GP, which is 80% off, and that's until March the 7th. And it's just surprisingly good, this. I'm not a huge, like, I don't know, Formula 1 fan or anything like that, but Glen and I played this. We both really enjoyed it. He reviewed it on the channel, and it's very slick. Features a full-on career mode. It's got some lovely tracks. But the most important part are the cars and like how it handles, and it handles brilliantly. It was always targeting 60 FPS, but I think they've managed to get it a lot smoother than it was at launch. So yeah, maybe something a little bit different. I actually went back to playing Gran Turismo 1 the other day on the PlayStation 1. I remember when that came out and everyone was like, wow, look at it, it's like a photograph. I've got to be honest, man, it looks bad now. Like, it looks bad. It's still a good game, but it still has that slow burn as well. Like, you start out in the slowest car in the world and you're like, oh my goodness, how long is this going to go on for? You do like 57 laps. Yeah, something weird about that game where it does gradually hook you. It always has like an RPG element to it. Anyway, I'm waffling. New Star GP, 80% off. That goes on until March the 7th. It's just 1 gig to download. Now, I am currently working on a massive all patched up episode. There have been a ton of games over the last couple of months that have had patches, and Trinity Fusion is just one of many. Now, this is down to, what, is it 60% off until March the 18th, taking it to £7.19. But it's not just had performance upgrades, it's also had content patches released for it. So new content, new material, and it's basically like a roguelite, but with fast-paced action combat. So it's not your standard. The game features 3 different characters, 3 different universes, and yeah, as I say, in my all patched up video, I will go over, you know, what's changed since it first came out, what the new content is. I think the new content pack is out on the Switch version. I haven't actually checked that, but it came up on my feed the other day, so I'm assuming, you know, they would have said if it was just for certain platforms. But either way, make sure you've got your notifications on if you want to find out about games that have been improved since they first came out. Another one is Another Crab's Treasure. My goodness, that's so much better. Trinity Fusion then is 60% off, as I say, till March the 18th, and it's a 3.7 gig download. Oh, it's nice to have Little Big Adventure Twinsen's Quest in the list. I was so happy when this was announced. It's now 25% off until March the 18th. That's the cheapest it's ever been. And this isn't just a remaster of the original Little Big Adventure that was way back. I actually played it first on PC, but it was also on PlayStation. And it does kind of show its age. They've updated certain things, like some control mechanics. Well, actually, all of the control mechanics are significantly more fluid than they were when they released. The original game, Little Big Adventure, basically had you switch between normal mode, athletic, aggressive, and sporty. And when you were in those modes, you could do different things like attack an enemy or like jump and things like that. But it was pretty damn clunky. With this one, it's kind of seamless. You seamlessly switch between those, and you've got this ball thing that you throw around. Now, I think it was if I'm not mistaken, I think it was a French game. I think so. It certainly had this like otherness to it that I could never put my finger on. And basically you've got this weird dictator called Dr. Funfrock, and he's taken over this planet. And the main protagonist is Twinsen. Now, in the original game, Twinsen loses his wife. I'm pretty sure it's his wife or his girlfriend, one of those. But in this one, he loses his sister, which I thought was a bit of an odd thing to change. But yeah, it is what it is. I still enjoyed myself. It does kind of show its age, but there's a little bit more to it than, yeah, the original game, and some of the original puzzles have been improved. There's more of a like actual puzzle element to it in some of the pushing boxes around or solving little mysteries and stuff. It's not perfect by any means, but well, maybe it was nostalgia goggles or what. If you're like me and you've got those, it's worth considering. It's 25% off until March the 18th, and it's just 1.9 gigs.
You're a wanted man. You should consider joining the rebels.
My hidden gem, realistically, it could have been Little Big Adventure because I've not used that one as a hidden gem, but we'll say rail grade because that's down to a lovely price. That's half price now until March the 6th, £12.49. And it's basically like a planetary railway management sim where you work as an administrator on behalf of a company called the Nakatani Chemicals. What I loved about this was how good the controls were for this style of game on a console. So it was really easy to place different tracks at different levels to gradually connect up the different stations on each planet, and you're trying to essentially create the most efficient workflow or the most efficient train line. They don't just go in one direction as well. You can have them like switch back and forward, stop at a platform, go back the other way, and you'll be investing in like the growth of different cities and also using things like zeppelins to export goods to try and get extra profits. There are 50 different missions and each of them has like a really nice setup. Remember like old school Command & Conquer? Like, I'm not saying this is as good as that. Do you remember you used to get like the FMV and it would just kind of talk you into it? That's the problem I have with a lot of modern games, is they either go too ham with the setup and you're sat there for like 3 weeks just thinking, oh my goodness, when's this cutscene going to end? Or there's nothing. It's like, do this. And I'm always sat there thinking, well, why bother? You know, I think I'll just twiddle my thumbs and go home, have a bagel. But here, the little story setups were just concise enough that I was like, okay, that's why I'm doing it on this planet. Let's get it done. See if I can achieve it, and then you move on to the next one. There's a photo mode here as well, so if you're a bit of a nerd like I am, you can create some cracking shots of what you've created. Yeah, Railgrade, such a good game. Really enjoyed this one. It's huge as well. It'll take you about 35 hours just to do those 50 missions, and then you've got a bunch of extra content as well to kind of work through. The sale for that one goes on until March the 6th. Something a bit meatier.
Responsible for the future success of our colony. We expect rapid progress. Flawless strategy.
Our Savaloy selection this week, those are the very cheap games. First up, I want to feature Paper Trail. Now, I know I mentioned this last week or the week before, but it's so good. And so many of you in the comments of like the recent videos over this week have said, oh, I picked up Paper Trail, absolutely loved it. It's 90% off, it's £1.67. That's an obscenely low price. It's ludicrous. It's well worth that. It's got a Metacritic at over 80%, and it's like a top-down puzzle adventure. I think you'll really get good value out of that. I mean, about 6 or 7 hours. Happy days. Rive was created by a couple. I think it's like this couple messaged me years ago. Well, I've made this little weird first-person shooter thing, and I was like, all right, let's give that a bash. And I had a blast. Like, don't get me wrong, it looks a bit like a dog's dinner, but it has that classic arcade feeling. You're trying to essentially destroy these writhing creatures before they can eat you. You got a load of different guns you can use. Very arcade feeling, like pick up and play, but super addictive. For £1.19, 85% off, yes please. Other War is an interesting take on like the Vampire Survivors genre. It's 75% off, and it combines that with like a tower defense. So you're placing towers down, but also using your own unit to do damage to enemies. That's the cheapest that one's ever been, and that's down to £1.34. Sundered Eldritch Edition, bit of a hidden gem as well, I'd say. That's down to £2.32. That's 85% off. And this is one of the very few 4-player or up to 4-player Metroidvanias. You can play the whole thing through solo, but if you can get a group of you, it's quality. Comes from Thunder Lotus, and I remember in my last video, by the way, I made an absolute balls up. I said that Thunder Lotus were the guys that made Bastion and Transistor. That's absolute baloney. So my sincerest apologies about my most heinous mistake. But this one, about 15 hours long as well. It's quite a meaty little Metroidvania. Has an interesting hand-drawn style, and it's another one that takes a little inspiration from the old Lovecraft Meister. Not too shabby. And the last little Savaloy is Giga Wrecker Alt, which is down 96% to 89 pence. Now, sadly, this is only in the EU regions, so apologies about that, but it's set in a near future Earth that's been absolutely ravaged by robots, and you smash your way through them using physics-based puzzles, a variety of different combat techniques, and then improve your skills with different blueprints you find. Solid little game. And that, my good people, is the end of the sales this week. Now, as I always say, if you want to save yourself a bit more money, you might as well go to switchup.gg to buy your eShop credit. I know loads of you do it anyway, so yeah, we appreciate that. We get a tiny kickback, and you get 5% in cash back. I asked in a community post what you're playing at the moment, and there are lots of people who are playing well, lots of backlog games, so it's nice to see people actually trying to work their way through some bits and bobs. But then it's always still that nice little jingle you get when you make a purchase on the eShop is a bit too enticing, isn't it? Thank you to our Patreons and members, all of you that enjoy the content and the channel. As always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!